My name is Jacqueline Smith, and the book that I decided to do my lesson plan on is How High Can a Dinosaur Count by Valorie Fisher. This book focuses on 2nd and 3rd grade mathematics. The lesson plan, or the grade level that I decided to do my lesson plan on, is 2nd grade math. This book has a bunch of different story problems in it with fun pictures to help students make connections to how to solve the story problems. I'm going to share with you 2 of the story problems that I really enjoyed while reading this book. The first one is, Tristan and Troy are always talking on the telephone. 6 telephones just ring for Tristan and 4 ring for Troy. How many telephones ring for the twins? And as you can see, there are 2 turkeys. One turkey has 4 telephones next to him, and the other turkey has 6 telephones next to him. So this picture really helps the students take the story problem and what's given in the story problem and make the connections of what they need to know to solve the problem. The last problem that I'd like to share is Daphne dines on daisies. For dinner she usually eats 15, but today she eats 6 fewer than usual. How many daisies does Daphne eat for dinner? And here is the picture that they have drawn to help the students solve this problem. So the standards that I chose to focus my lesson plan on is Standard 1, Story Problems, Objective 3C, and it states, student will write a story problem that relates to a given addition or subtraction equation, and write a number sentence to solve a story problem that is related to the environment. And the second standard is Standard 1, Computation, Objective 3E. Students will use the mathematical relationship between addition and subtraction and properties of addition to model and solve problems. The objectives that I chose to focus my lesson on is that students will set up and solve story problems involving basic addition or subtraction. And the last objective is students will create their own story problem and include a picture to go along with their problem. The instructional procedures that would take place for me to give my lesson would, first I would draw a T-chart on the board, and on one side of the T-chart I would have subtraction, on the other I would have addition, or subtraction and addition, and I would take key words that the students need to know to make the connection of what operation needs to take place for the students to solve their problem. So a great example of this would actually be one from one of the problems that I actually shared with you, and it states, she eats 6 fewer than usual. So I would take fewer and I would add that onto the subtraction side of my T-chart to hopefully have the students be able to you look up on that chart while they were solving their story problems and make the connection that if they see fewer in the story problems, that they need to subtract to find their answer. After I made that T-chart, I would then read some of the story problems in this book, like the ones that I read to you, and as a class we would try to find what the answer is to the story problems by getting the key points, looking at the fun pictures, and solving the problems. After we read some of the story problems in the book, I would then have the students, as a class, we would create our own story problem, pulling ideas from all the students and creating our own. And after creating our own story problem, I would then have some students go to the board and draw a picture that relates or corresponds to the story problem that we created. After us as a class created a story problem, I would then have the students go into pairs. I would pair off the students, and with their partner I'd have them create their own story problem, as well as a picture. I would make sure though that I emphasized to each student that they needed to draw their own pictures as well as write out their own problems. They can of course have the same problem as partners, but they just need to have it on their own piece of paper. So then they could do their family connection assignment, where they would take their story problem and picture home, share it with a family member, have the family member try to solve the problem, and if the family member was unable to solve the problem, then have the student explain to the family member what they needed to pull out of that story problem to get their correct answer. And then after they shared ideas and explained with their family member their story problem, I would then have them write about about 5 sentences of their experience that they had sharing their story problem with their family. The way that I would assess this lesson, or the way that I would assess the children, make sure that they got everything out of my lesson plan that they needed to about solving story problems, is I would first have them create their own story problem and draw a picture that corresponds with that story problem. I would also make sure that they wrote out what the answer was to their story problem and how to actually get the answer that they got. And lastly, I would make sure that I checked for understanding by determining the alignment between the story problem that they created, the picture that they drew, and also the answer that they got from their story problem. So this again is my lesson plan that I chose, and I really appreciate the time that you have given me to share my ideas.